This is the Joint Issues Committee of International and Domestic Affairs. I'm Robert Stark, joined with my co-committee chair, Jason Wright, and Marcus Ruiz-Evans as a facilitator for this meeting. Since I'd like to discuss the Civil Liberties Initiative, Marcus, if you want to bring that back up. If you have the text for that, Marcus, if you want to bring that up.
Got it. Doing it right now. Can you guys see that?
I see the mirror screen.
Okay. Let me try that again. Thanks, Jason. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. So I already have this as a forward. So I can literally make edits as you guys choose right now. I am your pen. Instruct me. And now I get to work with two William Shakespeare.
Just to start off with, if you just want to read what we have so far, and
Good point.
it's a bit rough, but if you want to, Marcus, if you want to go ahead and read it.
Okay. In the aftermath of greater political turmoil and the proposed January 6th commission on the Capitol Hill riots, the Biden-Harris administration has proposed one of the most draconian crackdowns on civil liberties in the name of fighting domestic extremism. The Biden administration has crafted a national strategy to combat domestic extremism using the same tactics long used against foreign threats, such as a guide to expand the intelligence state, using the organs of the post 9/11 terror state directed against American citizens. The strategy put forth includes increased spending, the greater coordination of law enforcement agencies, including greater information sharing surveillance powers, and greater collaboration with tech companies. Further proposals include greater screening of government employees over their political views. The political opposition will view this as a power grab, but this proposal brings about the question of what defines an extremist, thus giving greater power to a more omniscient police state. Besides that, a crafted proposal having dire implications for the civil liberties of American citizens, this demonstrates that the soft power of the American establishment is unable to hold the nation together. The abuse of civil liberties is often a sign that a nation is broken due to polarization, and that hard power must be used to maintain order and cohesion, and this crackdown on civil liberties will only further fuel this polarization. California values stand for civil liberties, civil rights, and freedom of speech, and these measures on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration are a blatant violation of the civil rights of Californians and only exacerbate polarization.
I guess one thing that I forgot to add is the question is whether Congress is voting versus the national strategy. So there was a proposed measure in the House and Senate a while back, but this sounds like a strategy that would not be voted upon. So we should add that, but we should fact check that and to confirm, because that's extremely undemocratic if that's the case. But maybe put that in there like in italics, and I want to fact check that later. And Jason, do you have any comments on that besides just sort of fixing grammatical issues?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think if this is a resolution, that we should put in all the whereas and wherefore and, such. But other than that, it like the language of it is pretty spot on. As far as the, Congress voting on stuff, as far as the U.S. National Congress, I believe there's some Senate oversight committee that might have, intelligence oversight committee that might have some sort of say in some semblance of some of that stuff. Try saying that at 60 times fast. Only easy if you're Snake. But yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't seem like Congress usually votes on stuff like that. That's like the CIA, the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, DOJ,
So that's crucial to add into that to the
I
initiative.
mean, usually that's how those things go. And I would not be surprised in the slightest to find out that that's the way they would go with such, proposed measures. Because do they really ask for Congress's approval to tap the phone of the Chancellor of Germany? Did they ask Congress's approval to spy on Bin Laden to figure out where he was hiding so they could go murder him extrajudicially?
No, of course not.
I mean, I'm not saying I was a fan of the guy, but I'm a fan of justice and democracy, and that's definitely not justice or democracy.
Yeah, like how they disposed his body. I'm not going to endorse the conspiracy theory about Biden's body being fake. I'm not going to endorse that on the air, but I do think it is suspicious, how they didn't do an autopsy for the journalism and how he just kind of disappeared.
Well, they disposed of his body at sea, right? And in a blatant kind of a FU move to all of the Islamic world. Because whether you're an evil-hearted person or a good-hearted person, if you are a practitioner of Islam, there are certain burial rites and funeral traditions that must be observed. Religious beliefs that must be observed upon death. And they blatantly, knowingly said, yeah, because you value such a thing, we are going to make absolutely sure that that cannot be done. That was why they did that. And they refused to even take down the location from what was, said. Very unceremoniously dumped him into the sea like trash, along with their trash dump. And just for everyone out there, one of the reasons why the oceans of the world have so much trash in them is because of the freaking Navy. But yeah, that's why it's very much even anti-American, right? What were they? The Rosenberg, right? Who gave the nuclear technology to Russia or to the Soviet Union, right? They got a trial.
They were executed, but they were given a degree of due process, which is seems like we've been kind of moving away with that. I mean, there's obviously been violations of civil rights throughout American history, but there has been this trajectory that I kind of think it started a bit with Clinton, but then it really took off with the Bush era and the war on terror under Bush after 9/11, and then what's going on now is even further taking it even further.
Well, and really, you can draw it all the way back to McCarthy. McCarthyism is one of the. I mean, that was the whole thing when the Russophobia reared its head again. It was whoa! I thought we got over McCarthyism. We realized.
Oh yeah, the Russia
just
gate.
Blindly accusing anyone of any opposition as a Russian spy.
That's going on.
It was pretty anti-American.
I think this one should maybe focus on the Biden administration, but there's plenty of other issues like Facebook having a notification if notifying people that one of their friends on Facebook might be a potential extremist, but extremely vague about that and giving them the option to report them.
And that again comes straight back to McCarthy. That was one of his big things. The Soviet Union was also really big on that. You know who else was really big on that? Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. So was Winston Churchill. The Brits had a huge problem with Nazi spies, and so theirs was a bit more legitimate, I would say. They weren't just like, hey, anyone who disagrees, you report them over here and we'll disappear them. They were a little more like, we'll follow them around and see whether or not these people are actually spies.
I'm not apologetic with what happened in Washington. Obviously, it was the people got involved. A lot of them did do things that were blatantly illegal. But I do think this this idea that there's this massive network of extremists, it's just being kind of drummed up to instill fear and to justify this crackdown. But I think the main point I'd emphasize is that the crackdown in civil liberties, I have this in here, but that the use of hard power is a sign that a nation is so divided. It is, you see that with it's a sign of authoritarian leaders for sure, but it's a sign that a nation's fundamentally broken, as opposed to the use of soft power, which there have been examples of blatant violations, obviously, of civil rights, civil liberties in the past. Primarily, the American establishment has relied upon soft power for the most part.
Well, and then there was, what was it, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or something like that? The only American city to get bombed by American bombs.
So there's countless historical examples.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it was a time where the American government said, we do not like these people getting so well established. We don't like the way they're communicating. We don't like the things that they believe in. So let's kill them, was their decision, right? It's like, 2 + 2 must equal kill them. No, dude. 2 + 2 = 4, not kill them. I understand you can write it with the calculator, if you hold it upside down, squint your eye, whatever. But it doesn't mean that is the correct answer. And at a certain point, the United States very clearly stopped caring what is the correct answer. Just kind of went a little more for what's the easy answer. We try this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Who said that one? It was JFK.
What is the name of this bill he's proposing?
To PBS has something on it, and the PBS article is probably going to be it's going to be biased in favor of Biden, but it does give some of the basics.
Okay. What do you guys think of the...
From what I could see so far, the name of it is just Senate Bill whatever. It's not been given some name yet.
Okay.
So there is a link to a PDF that reveal the entire strategy is actually linked to from the PBS article on a PDF.
All right, 1 second. Let's go to the... StreamYard is sharing a window. 1 second. Let me stop that. Okay. Why is this not... 1 second. Read fact sheet. National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism.
And then also it says a joint network with other countries and heavily involved with Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon.
I could read this quick in like 2 minutes. You guys care if I
that's
read
fine.
this? Jason? Okay. For immediate release, June 15, 2021, fact sheet, National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism from Joe Biden. That's called the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. On his first full day in office, President Biden directed his national security team to lead a 100-day comprehensive review of the U.S. government efforts to address domestic terrorism, which has evolved into the most urgent terrorism threat the United States faces today. As a result of that review, the Biden administration is releasing the first ever national strategy for countering domestic terrorism to address this challenge to America's national security and improve the federal government's response. Domestic terrorism is not a new threat in the United States, yet it is a threat Americans have endured too often in recent years. The comprehensive strategy provides a nationwide framework for the U.S. government and partners to understand and share domestic terrorism-related information, prevent domestic terrorism recruitment and mobilization to violence, disrupt and deter domestic terrorism activity, and confront long-term contributors to domestic terrorism. Our approach will both protect the nation and the civil liberties of its citizens. Under federal law, domestic terrorism is defined as activities that involve acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or any state, appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping, and occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. The review is rooted in an expert assessment of the domestic terrorism threat provided by the intelligence and law enforcement communities. An unclassified summary of that assessment was released in March so the public could see the findings. It found that the two most lethal threats of today's domestic terrorism threats are racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists who advocate for the superiority of the white race, and anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists such as militia violent extremists. To develop a government-wide strategy to counter domestic terrorism, the Biden administration consulted extensively with a wide array of experts across the U.S. government, as well as with leaders in Congress, state and local governments, academia, civil society, religious communities, and foreign governments. Throughout the process, we embraced the protection of civil rights and civil liberties as a national security imperative. The strategy we are releasing today is carefully tailored to address violence and reduce the factors that lead to violence, threaten public safety, and infringe on the free expression of ideas. Wow. It is organized around 4 pillars, the core elements of how the Biden administration will improve the U.S. government's response to this persistent, evolving, and lethal threat to our people, our democracy, and our national security. Number 1, understand and share domestic terrorism-related information. The United States government will enhance domestic terrorism analysis and improve information sharing throughout law enforcement at the federal, state, local, tribal, territorial levels, and where appropriate, private sector partners. The Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and DOJ have implemented a robust system to methodically track domestic terrorism cases nationwide. The Department of State, as well as the intelligence and law enforcement communities, are learning more from foreign partners about the international dimensions of this threat. That's interesting. Why do they need to ask a foreign government about domestic terrorism in America? Whatever. The Department of State will continue to assess whether additional foreign entities linked to domestic terrorism can be designated as foreign terrorist organizations or specifically designated global terrorists under relevant statutory.
And that goes back to the comparison to McCarthyism and the anti-Russia hysteria.
Yeah, that reads as Russia made the white supremacists do all this, so therefore let's designate Russia as a foreign terrorist organization. That's the first thing that pops in my head, but I could be way wrong. The Department of the Treasury, in coordination with law enforcement, is exploring ways to enhance the identification and analysis of financial activity of domestic terrorists. The Department of Homeland Security is enhancing its analysis of open source information to identify threats earlier and will create a structured mechanism for receiving and sharing within government credible non-governmental analysis. Prevent domestic terrorism, recruitment, and mobilization to violence, drawing on the expertise of a variety of departments and agencies, has revamped support to community partners who can help prevent individuals from ever reaching the point of committing terrorist violence. The U.S. government will strengthen domestic terrorism prevention resources and services. For the first time, the Department of Homeland Security has designated domestic violent extremism as a national priority area within the department's Homeland Security Grant Program, which means that over $77 million will be allocated to state, local, tribal, and territorial partners to prevent, protect against, and respond to domestic violent extremism. DHS and FBI are working to strengthen local prevention, threat assessment, and threat management frameworks. The Department of Defense is incorporating training for service members, separating retiring from the military on potential targeting of those with military training by violent extremist actors. The U.S. government will improve public awareness of federal resources to address concerning or threatening behavior before violence occurs. The U.S. government will augment its efforts to address online terrorist recruitments and mobilization to violence by domestic terrorists through increased information sharing with the technology sector and the creation of innovative ways to foster digital literacy and build resilience to recruitment and mobilization. The United States also recently joined the Christchurch Call to Action to Eliminate Terrorist and Violent Extremist Content Online, an international partnership between governments and technology companies that works to develop new multilateral solutions to eliminating terrorist content online while safeguarding the freedom of online expression. Disrupt and deter the work of, this is almost over, the work of federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, tribal, territorial enforcement partners is critical to countering domestic terrorism. The U.S. government will increase support to federal, state, local law enforcement in addressing domestic terrorism nationwide. The U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI field offices across the country have formally made domestic terrorism a top priority and are tracking comprehensively domestic terrorism-related cases, reallocating or requesting appropriate funding and resources as needed to target the threat. That includes over $100 million in additional resources for the DOJ, FBI, and DHS included in the President's fiscal year 2022 budget to ensure the federal government has the analysts, investigators, prosecutors, and other personnel needs to thwart domestic terrorism and do justice when the law has been broken. State, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement will have access to increased intelligence sharing and training on domestic terrorism and associated threats. DOJ is closely examining whether new legislative authorities that balance safety and the protection of civil liberties are necessary and appropriate. That's a smoking gun right there. The U.S. government is improving employee screening to enhance methods for identifying domestic terrorists who might pose insider threats. That's a second smoking gun. The Office of Personnel Management will consider updates to the forms used to apply for sensitive roles in the federal government that could assist investigators in identifying potential domestic terrorism threats. DOJ, DOD, DHS are similarly pursuing efforts to ensure domestic terrorists are not employed within our military or law enforcement ranks and improve screening and vetting purposes. Training and resources will be developed for state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement partners, as well as sensitive private sector partners to enable them to enhance their own employee screening programs and prevent individuals who pose domestic terrorism threats from being placed in positions of trust. There's not really a whole lot here. This is as vanilla as they can get with this. But I know they're doing stuff like asking people their political...
Vanilla or making it vague actually is more dangerous because there's not specific details. Are you reading from the PBS article or the?
I'm reading the fact sheet from the PBS article.
And then there's also a PDF which is more lengthy.
Read the full strategy. Yeah, that's 32 pages.
Well, and so if we could real quick, could we go back to these two parts? You said there's a smoking gun and there's another smoking gun.
Sure, sure.
Can you elaborate on these parts individually?
Yeah. One second. Okay.
And then one thing to add is, so Glenn Greenwald just tweeted that Biden was one of the key architects of the 90s era crime bill, which did crack down on civil liberties. So I'll link to that if that's relevant.
Please.
Yeah, that's totally. I remember when Biden was running for president, that was one of the big things that kept coming up was like, why would anyone vote for this guy? He's part of all of those problems we had through like the 80s, 90s era into the early 2000s. A lot of that's due to stuff that he like helped to pilot that boat on. Why would anyone vote that man in as the president in this modern era where we're looking for change away from that stuff, right? And here he is immediately pushing again for, and like it sounds really nice, that whole, summary there. But it does also seem like there's some loophole room getting made. I also wonder on this whole thing about, if you're violating laws of the federal government or any state, like, I mean, didn't we kind of go over, some of that stuff with like that whole transgender, check your child's gender at school thing that they're doing in Florida? And then they want to push it so that every state has to like start following, every state's laws, where, if someone goes and gets someone's originally from a state and they go and move somewhere, they have to be able to prove beyond like any reasonable doubt that they didn't go there intending specifically for the purpose of getting an abortion. Because if they did, they are guilty of first degree murder, right? Like, and now every state is going to have to play by every other state's crazy ass, or pardon my French, insane rules. It sounds to me like what they're saying here is pretty much that, well, if you're breaking any law of any state, then you now can suffer. It was like right in the beginning. They're like, you can suffer the consequence now. And again, I am not down with a lot of these laws that are totally unconstitutional, as well as detrimental.
One more thing to add is I think they're going to be used against the left because they're using words like right-wing extremism, white nationalism, basically a reference to the Capitol Hill riots and Trump supporters. But I can almost guarantee they'll be used against the left as well. So that's important.
Oh yeah, why else would they finally go all out?
If you can find somewhere where that can be added.
Yeah, I agree. Why else would they finally go all out on including tribal? Oh yes, and tribal folks, you're going to get, all sorts of resources, and we'll keep you in the loop and tell you who of your people is a terrorist and who you have to hand over to us because they're a terrorist. And wait, aren't they supposed to have like a certain level of autonomy?
This is the essay. Robert, you wanted me to add in a section saying they're going to come after the left, right? Something like that.
This gives them the tools to come after the left in the future as well. See, this is not about
instead of just saying the left,
a right-wing issue, but say that this is giving them the tools to go after the left in the future as well, and that is like what will likely happen.
Can I suggest that we say that it just lets them go after pretty much anybody that they choose? That way, it's not a left versus the right, or oh hey, lefties,
anyone.
It's like Big Brother is here.
Say go after anyone they choose, regardless of the left-right spectrum. Regardless of their political ideology from the left-right spectrum, or their background or creed. Well, anyhow, I have to get going now, but you have my permission to continue working on this if you're able to. But I do have to get going.
Okay, I'll just leave it at, see the big yellow highlight section?
Oh yeah,
Can
I
you
see
guys
that.
see? So we have to say specifically what this thing is doing that's never been done before. And I feel we still haven't done that super well. I think we're getting closer, but we have to, like, what are they doing that's wrong? So they want to look into people's political backgrounds. Okay, so that's not bad enough. It has to be, they're going to make it where government employees now have to indicate what their political party is before getting a
Oh
job.
yeah,
That is
that's
removing
part
a
of it.
civil right.
I
That's a specific.
have to head out now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, brother.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Okay. So I'll leave it at that. We have to have a list of, this is different and new, and here's specifically what it is. I cleaned up a lot of the language. I think the beginning part is good. I think this other part is good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm trying to think of. I mean, because I can, me, I can draw all sorts of parallels throughout United States history with half of this stuff. I mean, you can go back to the Revolutionary War era, before the United States of America was such, when it was colonies. The Brits had this same mentality over the colonists. There wasn't massive amounts of media coverage on anything. There wasn't like mainstream media sources like that. There were like, newspapers here and there that pretty much only ever made it as far as regional, right? Because in that day, to send anything further than regional would take more than a day, and then that newspaper is out of date. They're getting yesterday's news, literally. So, there are some key differences, but the Crown had people spying, tons and tons and tons of people spying, mainly to figure out who's who doesn't agree with them, right? Who might be a rabble rouser, so that they could jail them, arrest them, hold them without any sort of trial, because, what are civil rights at that point? There's no United States Constitution or Declaration of Independence even, right? So it's all just British rule, admiralty law. And, that's military law, military naval law. And, military law is much more harsh, much more vague, so that whoever's there on the scene can just interpret whatever, they can decide whether your crime is really a crime or not. Oh yeah, I saw you run that guy over back there and then, flee the scene. But I'm going to go ahead and say, you didn't really do anything wrong. I'm going to rule it this way, and boom. I mean, it's not literally that bad, but it pretty much makes that situation out of whenever you do go to trial, whenever you do go step foot before a judge, they're going to have that ability to interpret it whatever way they so choose. So if they like you, they could potentially let you off the hook, like we saw with Brock Turner. But if they don't like you, you might end up like that one, was it like 8-year-old kid who got like 5 years for stealing a backpack because his parents couldn't afford one for him for school or something like that, and he needed a new backpack, and yeah, he knowingly went in and stole a cheap backpack, and they gave him 5 years. whereas the rapist that's caught red-handed in the act gets a slap on the wrist because we don't want to, damage this kid's, obviously bright future, bright and potential-filled future. I mean, I only see potential for one thing happening in that dude's future, but the judge got to decide otherwise. And this is a modern case that's happening because nothing has really changed since all the way back then. Since 1770s, nothing has really changed. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Yes, it's the new boss. They are using the same set of rules as the old boss.
Okay.
I do really find it interesting about a couple of these things, though. And I think if they do really, because it does seem like they're building in some loopholes. One, to have further jurisdiction on tribal land, and further input and say-so into tribal issues. But two, it also seems like loopholes for them to decide, right? Well, I'm deciding that you're a terrorist. And
yeah.
Yeah. And then the sane, rational part of me says, well, has the United States citizenry ever had any say-so in who is a terrorist and who isn't? It's always been the government that decides that. I think also the amount of spying on and very actively limiting American citizenry, very specifically pertaining to American citizenry. I mean, they do have the little part about foreign and whatnot, but I remember that article about the Oregon father and son who went and trained at some Al-Qaeda camp. And I remembered about it again because, thought about it again because they've got that piece about, and those who, receive militant training from, violent groups or however they put it. And it's well, yeah, they've kept eyes on those people. That dude and his son came back. They were being watched the moment they left for that place. The moment they got back, they got detained. They got stopped by the federal government who said, geez, look at this. You're out there training with Al-Qaeda, who is an enemy of the American state. So you are now a trained enemy combatant here on our soil. We don't really hear much about them anymore, do we? Just saying, it seems like instead of just justifying it with the Patriot Act, they're going to have some guy who, because no one likes the Patriot Act. Well, Bush. But really, it was being written before Bush. Before 9/11 happened, that thing was being written and put together. I mean, there's the original Patriot Act from way back when. Wasn't that during the era of McCarthyism, too? I mean, America had kind of a long stretch. I guess, really, America only had a short little break from McCarthyism. And like once 9/11 happened, if you didn't 100%, America, 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 and cry tears of red, white, and blue every time you see the flag, then you're like a terrorist now, and you hate America, which couldn't be really much more anti-American unless you were going to then spit on the flag or something, right? Or go shred up the Declaration of Independence. That's about the only way you could be any more un-American. Infringing on people's rights, forcing people to believe a certain way, jailing them or, labeling them as, terrorists just because they don't agree with you, right? All of these things are very much against what America was founded on. They are not undemocratic. They are anti-democratic. They do not allow for democracy. They are 100% completely juxtaposed to one another. So for me, I'm like, I find it hard to find anything new other than the fact that they're covering their butts with, legislation that's going to be passed by the decent guy, rather than the West Texas, the Lost Village idiot.
Hey, I gotta go in like 15 minutes. Could I show you the email that I have packaged for you and Robert?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Okay, so this is to you guys, Biden Civil Liberties Resolution. So the Biden explanation, here's the fact sheet that was included. Here's the national strategy PDF. So that's his explanation of what he's doing. And then there's 137 civil rights organizations that oppose. That's their list of what's wrong with it. And the conservative Cato group, there's their list of what's wrong with it. So Biden, and then what's wrong with it. The action items are all of this text here that's in the nice, pretty font. It's basically, it's good. I just cleaned it up a little, but it's Robert's words. It makes sense. It fits, same thing here and here. The big meat is what exactly are they doing? So we oppose this because they are going to expand the intelligence state using the post 9/11 terror state. Okay. The strategy includes more money. Okay. Greater coordination of law enforcement agencies. Okay. And they're going to share their data. All right. And they're going to work with tech companies. Okay. And greater screening of government employees over their political views. Whoa. What? And this proposal brings about the question of what defines an extremist. What? So, I mean, these may be bad, but that's not bad enough on its own. Law enforcement, we'll talk more with law enforcement. It's got to be a clear, this is new and bad. And like asking government employees about their political views before they have a job is something new and horrible.
Yeah, so I hear you saying that very loud and clear. So let's emphasize that then a little.
I don't know the extent of these powers. This is just what Robert said. I don't know if what he's saying is correctly phrased. I'm not familiar.
Okay.
I don't know what they're doing enough to know. This is Robert's opinion. Further proposals include greater screening of government employees over their political views. I've heard something. I don't know enough to rephrase that.
Okay. And is it in the PDF thing?
That's the question.
That's just another breakdown.
I don't know the answer. So
okay. When you send that to me, the link for that PDF is going to be in the email.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So I will give it a very thorough look over, just specifically to try and find this answer, and let me even write it down. to do. Tap on do. Like I am getting this done, even if it makes my eyes bleed. Because federal government's not known as easy reading.
Well, the good news is that you have the key sources. So you have what the Biden administration is saying in their fact sheet and their thing, both you and Robert. And then you have what the Cato Institute, their fact sheet on what's wrong with it, and the Civil Rights Group fact sheet on what's wrong with it. So the answer's in there. You have here's what Biden's saying, and here was what two separate groups saying, that's horrible, are saying. So the list of what's super mega bad for yellow is somewhere in those documents, and you and Robert have everything nice and neat and ordered, and then you got the speech right underneath it. So you shouldn't have to go looking further than that. It should roughly be in there. Everything you needed.
Okay. I'll look there first then. And yeah, if there's what is it, 135?
I think it's 35 pages. However, I would suggest...
No. I mean, the group of civil rights organizations that are like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like 135.
If there's a huge conglomeration of civil rights organizations that are all saying, ahem, red flag, then I can pretty much guarantee there is going to be a huge red flag somewhere. I mean, if it was one group saying, hey, I don't like this, it's easy to kind of discount it. A few of them kind of warrants looking at it. 135 civil rights groups getting together saying this thing is going to violate civil rights. I think that's a pretty clear answer right there. Also, let me give a shout out to Zimmerman Production Incorporated, Mark. I'm wondering if it's Mark Zimmerman, maybe. But Mark, thank you for your support for Cal Exit. Awesome to have you. Awesome to have you on board. Also glad to know people are tuning in and, staying focused on all of this stuff that's going on. What we like to refer to as the collapse of America. Meeting from South Africa? Oh, hey, South Africa! Hey! Yeah, same as Texas. There are actually several. New Hampshire, Texas, Alaska, California, or exit, as well as Washington, Oregon, Washington. It's definitely becoming a thing that people are noticing. The Democratic United States of America does not really seem to be so democratic, and does not seem to be so united either.
What?
I know, right? Shocker.
They just had another poll come out, and it was lowest enthusiasm in being an American amongst the youth, ever.
Yeah, you were covering that at the California governor's recall debate on Sunday, right?
Oh yeah. It's if you're under 30.
And then Breaking Points covered it just a day or two ago.
It's very reflective, because you look at the recall debates, especially the July 4th one, and you could totally see it on display. So you look at the survey, and it's if you're under 30, a tiny minority of people under 30 are proud to be an American, right? But then you get older, and they are. And what did we see on the recall debates on July 4th? Hey, given nobody's saying that unity is going to work and polarization is the worst ever, what do you think? And the people in their 40s and 30s were yeah, that's pretty bad. Things are getting bad. And the two guys who were in their 60s were America's the greatest. It's the best ever, beacon of democracy. And we're just going to work hard and come together. And the messaging was just two totally separate concepts. And there was a huge age gap between the messaging, and that perfectly matches what that survey indicated.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, me as the chairman of international outreach for Yes California. I always love to point out that if California was independent, being one of the largest agricultural entities of the world, we most likely would be trading a lot more with, nations in Africa, nations all over the Pacific, South Pacific, probably trade more with Iran, India, Pakistan, heck, maybe even Afghanistan if things cool down enough that trade can go through successfully, right? Whoever runs a place if they're the one running the place. It's whether or not you can be friends with them or do business with them. Seems like right now the people that are still in power are at least reasonable, but they might not be there for so much longer, And you saw Jack B. Hey. You saw that article I posted about the American troops destroying stuff rather than leave it for the Afghanistan military to defend themselves against the Taliban. Very clearly, it's not going to get taken by the Taliban if you leave it. If you leave it, it will be used to defend the people of Afghanistan from the Taliban. Should be what America is all about, and it's what America says they're all about. But no, they decided, well, we're not going to leave our stuff for other people to use. If I can't take my toy with me, no one gets to have it. I'm just going to break it. Seems like the mentality is, let's make sure that they need us to come back. So we have justification, a little job security, right?
And the same thing as they did with Iraq. Pull out because they don't want you there, and they beg you to come back in. And guess what? You're still occupying them. Oh, what an incredible coincidence how that worked out.
Oh, but no one can say the troops didn't get pulled.
Right?
They didn't really. They weren't all removed. There were still some, but then, the flow just went back the other way and ramped up again. But hey, we tried to pull out. You see, we were needed, America.
Yeah.
And then I look at what kind of democracy has America really brought to Iraq.
Yeah.
Is it the same kind of democracy they brought to Iran? The same kind of democracy they brought through, what was his name? Was it Alejandro Pinochet? Right? The United States of America has this habit of going into places, other people's places, saying, oh yes, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix up your place and I'm going to make it run right. And then when you look at the state of the home afterwards, it's dilapidated, it's been gutted, things are smashed up on the floor, and there's rats and roaches everywhere. It looks like the frat party of all frat parties just happened and nobody came by to clean up.
Yep. Huh. Okay. What am I doing here?
Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit off topic. I'm sorry. I was just thinking of international relations.
Oh yeah. Signatures collected. Sorry. Okay. 10 more minutes and then I'm gonna call it Jack B, 3 feet, Zimmerman. Hella howdy, dudes. That's how we say it, California. Jason. Last 10 minutes. What do you guys have the resolution? Do you want to talk about Puerto Rico?
Um, yeah, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the people of the Afar region in Ethiopia, Tigray. Uh, People are literally starving to death over there right now. There is technically a ceasefire. Technically. Oh, nice. Cape Party. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, then, we definitely should be doing a little more with Cape then. If you, was it Free Free? Um, if you haven't already seen it, the Yes California stream should, not the stream, my apologies, the channel should have a video with a statement of solidarity to the Cape Party. You could check that out in a few minutes once we're done here, if you feel like. We are definitely excited to be working with the folks from Cape, with the folks from Texas, you know, anyone we're working with, really. we're excited. So thank you very, very much for your interest. And, you know, it keeps me, you know, thinking of the people of Ethiopia, keeps me thinking of the people of Egypt having, you know, been cut off from the Valley of Kings for a while, and the way that they stood up to their government, and makes me think of Israel, Palestine, makes me think of Iraq, Afghanistan, makes me think of, there's what was it? Was it Mozambique recently that had that revolution that started, got really, really bloody. I feel like in independent California, it's clear the California track record is clearly not the same as the American track record. We don't like going into places to try and fix or not fix. We just really, you know, seem to care about people, and, you know, don't want to see people suffer, especially when we produce so much here. So it keeps me hopeful that one day we might be our own independent country again, and at that time that we might actually further relations with all nations on the African continent. And, you know, really, as Californians, start to, one, try and right some of the wrongs of the past. I mean, they can never be undone, but recompense through legitimate humility and compassion, you know, it can be possible. But it's the only way to make it possible is if we start, right? And I don't see America starting on that, but, you know, in independent California, not saying 100% guarantee we would, but when you look at the trend, kind of says it's likely, at least. And so I'm really glad to see, you know, when friends, international friends, stop in, tune in. That's really I'm fighting back the heartwarmed tears of joy right now. So yeah, thank you. And really, you know, to anyone in any nation in Africa, on behalf of just, you know, the sane people who, you know, care here, please accept my deepest apologies and sympathies for the ineptitude of world leaders, not just in the American government, but like all around the world. People debate whether or not to talk about whether or not they should potentially do something to help. And it saddens me, it sickens me, and my heart is with everyone who is suffering over there right now.
Yeah.
So I guess I will go ahead and close it out now. Thank you all for joining us. Please stay safe. This has been the International and Domestic Issues Committee, the Joint Resolutions Committee for the Yes California CalExit Congress on Tuesday, July the 6th of 2021. I've been one of your co-hosts, Jason Wright, as well as my co-chair who's no longer present, Robert Stark, and our fantabulous moderator, Mr. Marcus Ruiz Evans, who happens to also be the president of Yes California organization. So, international friends, you know who to reach out to, myself or him. If you'd like to come join in on our Congress sessions on Sunday, every Sunday, what is it, 11 a.m. Pacific time?
Every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah. And Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Catch us anytime. We're glad to have you. And thanks for tuning in.